Hello everybody, I'm KC and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About, and welcome to the latest installment of To Infinity War and Beyond. And before Marvel introduces new superheroes, let's check in on the hero that became an unprecedented success in Iron Man 2. After redefining himself as Iron Man in the previous movie, Tony seems to be living at large. The public loves him as a hero, and he's fighting hard to keep the Iron Man suit away from the government. But that new reputation is slowly taking its toll on him in more ways than one, and his latest enemy makes him realize that the past can always come back to haunt you. Iron Man 2 is regarded as the worst movie in the MCU. People either hate it or think it's just okay. But personally, I hold it in a bit of a higher regard. I actually think this is a natural progression from where we left off in the first movie. Just to clarify that no, this is not as good as the first one. Yes, there is some sloppy execution, and yes, this is the one where Tony pees in his suit.
You know, the question I get asked most often is, Tony, how do you go to the bathroom in the suit? Just like that.
Which was stupid, but I think it's still a worthwhile movie. Let's start with Tony, since his journey is my favorite part. What I really love about this movie is how it presents the next phase of Tony dealing with his new position as Iron Man. Yes, he makes a ton of mistakes. Yes, he's in over his head. And yes, he doesn't ask for help when he is dangerously sick and probably should. But doesn't that make sense? This is a guy who in the span of less than a year went from not having a care in the world to essentially having the world weighing on his shoulders. And while I still think he means well, I don't think he realized how heavy that burden would be. Especially when he can't think straight, when he's scared that the arc reactor that's keeping him alive is slowly killing him, and as far as he can tell, there's nothing he can do about it. Tony walked out of the first movie with a hefty load of responsibility and trust issues, which is why he's so adamant about not giving the government his suit, and why I don't think he asked Pepper or Rhodey for help with his issues. They'd probably say he's in over his head, which yeah, he is. But even if it's killing him, he still wants to fight the good fight. He still wants to prove that there is some good he can do. To me, Tony's major character arc and conflict in the MCU is learning how to handle the true weight of responsibility that comes with being a hero. He wants to make the world a better place. He wants to show he can be a better person. But of course he's reckless. Of course he's impulsive. He doesn't know any other way yet. He really cares, but because he's never had any real responsibility before, he has no idea what he's doing, even though he thinks he does, and he thinks he can do it alone. The irony is that while this won't be the last time, this is the first time that Tony finds a solution through the help of others, in this case with S.H.I.E.L.D., which, by the way, as someone who knew next to nothing about the Marvel Universe when I saw this movie, I got a real kick out of seeing so much more of Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. Samuel L. Jackson is just the best as this character, and this is the first time you really get to see that. And I'm a sucker for interconnected world building, which, again, I didn't know this series was gonna have. So all that stuff with Tony's father being a founding member of this organization that's recruiting him now made me so much more invested in this world. And while this would become a standard for the MCU, this was really the first movie that dives full force into making it a part of the plot and not just an Easter egg. So while that's what I love about the movie, and there are other things I liked, I'll admit where the critics have a point. The pacing is off. There is a lot of crap going on in this movie, and this is pre-Avengers, so I don't think they got the hang of balancing so many plot points yet. I think everything comes together nicely in the climax, but getting there can be a chore. From Tony's story, to the villains, to Pepper and Rhodey's roles, to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s involvement, to introducing a pivotal character in the form of Black Widow, it's a lot to juggle, and the movie does fumble quite a bit at keeping the pace steady. It causes a lot of things to move way too quickly, and it just doesn't flow that well, especially compared to the first movie where things had time to breathe. With that said, I don't think these points are particularly bad, just not put together as well as last time. I like Pepper running the company and how her relationship with Tony is evolving, not to mention that Gwyneth Paltrow and Robert Downey Jr.'s back and forth is still delightfully charming. I actually like the change in casting to Don Cheadle as James Rhodes. I think he represents what they were trying to get across with the character better, I think he has better chemistry with Downey, and even if it may have been a bad call, I understand his motivation for taking one of Tony's suits and becoming War Machine. Besides, it turned out to be beneficial in the long run because he kicks ass in that suit. I even like the villains. We've seen over and over how difficult it is for superhero movies to juggle more than one villain, because they probably shouldn't, but I think it works here. Since Justin Hammer, played by Sam Rockwell, is a self-indulgent egomaniac who wants to be on top and thinks he's in control, while Ivan Vanko, played by Mickey Rourke, is the silent brains of the operation who actually is in control. I used to think that Hammer was the more obvious villain here, since he's more boastful, and let's be honest, Rockwell is probably Downey's only competition for stealing a scene, but watching it again, it seems like it strikes a good balance. And Vanko, or Whiplash, came off as legitimately threatening, and his motives of revenge against Tony for what his father did is a very understandable one. Even if the Whiplash getup can look silly on paper, and it kinda does, they managed to make it look intimidating. And even though we only saw film reels of him, I feel like Howard Stark was a character here too. He was only a name in the first movie, but now we have a face, some characteristics, and parts of his legacy, both the good and the bad. From these few hints, we can gather that Howard was eccentric, but kinda shady, not great at expressing feelings, but he still had them, and of course, extremely intelligent. I also kinda like the touch of Tony trying so hard to escape his past, but in order to solve the problem he's facing right now, he has to look into that past where his father developed the solution. The only one who felt kinda tacked on was Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson. Now don't get me wrong, Johansson does a great job with this character. Her reveal as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent was a legitimate surprise to me, and she gets a badass fight scene or two, but at least in this movie, she seemed pretty one note. More of an object and not so much a character. Her future appearances would do a much better job of portraying her, but still, this wasn't a great first impression. But even if some things could have used more work, one thing this movie improves on is the action. Taking the eye-popping effects in the first movie and giving them even more life and much more to do. The climax has this amazing flight sequence and garden fight that's way more exciting than the final fight in the last movie. It really steps things up in terms of fights and camera work and really makes the whole thing feel more dynamic, which makes sense since this movie was storyboarded by Genndy Tartakovsky. Yes, that Genndy Tartakovsky. But the final confrontation with Whiplash is pretty lame. His drones are a pretty good threat, but still, his last battle lasts for about a minute, and it was lame. But overall, I still really like this movie. Is it as good as the first one? Not at all. Could it have used more polish? Absolutely. There are things that are jumbled up and mashed in with everything else going on in this movie that it feels like a lot of things get resolved way too quickly. But while the whole may be rough, the sum of its parts are actually pretty great. I liked a lot of things this movie tried to do, and I think it succeeded at a good chunk of them. I'm not even sure what you'd cut to make time to focus on everything that's going on. I think if the first movie hadn't been so successful that they rushed this one into production, we could have had a movie that rivaled the original. Instead of a movie where Tony immediately synthesizes an element that 2 minutes before was believed to be impossible to synthesize, and doesn't even give it a name. I know it has faults, but if anything, it got Tony ready for a much bigger mission over the horizon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.